Hey there, Wargamers. Austin here with Death Ray Designs, and here on the second day of Christmas video, we're going to be teaching you how to paint our terrain with just rattle cans. So for this challenge, at least the tools that I've gathered at the beginning are going to be our paints, our tools, and our safety gear, and our model that we're going to be painting. So in the paint section, we've just got 6 cans of rattle paint, and on the far end there, we've got an orange, like a dark orange, then a lighter orange. We have a medium brown, an off-white, black primer, and gray primer. In our tools and safety section, we've got our quick mask cards. You can just use any kind of thick cardboard, cut up a cereal box, anything will do. Masking tape, a respirator, and some gloves to keep your hands clean. The model that we're using today is a Blacksite Armageddon Prometheum Refinery. We've got it in sub-assembly form, meaning that we left parts off that we want to paint different colors. Let's get started. So, our model has already been assembled partially and prepped with Krylon Pro Enamel Black in flat black specifically. Don't get the semi-gloss or the gloss. It looks almost identical. Make sure you get the one that says flat. You can also get the Rust-Oleum ones. Pretty much any kind of flat black enamel spray paint will do for priming this. We find that it works a lot better than most other spray paints. It creates a better bond with the MDF and a good surface to paint on. This is our base piece. We're going to be doing this in gray tones, and this is our upper, and it's going to be done in off-white tones. This is one of the reasons why we did the assembly this way, just because it's going to be a heck of a lot easier to address each section individually as opposed to trying to mask one off and then the other to do 2 different color sets. Then for accents, we have our ladders, which are going to be done in orange, and our removable gate pieces that are going to be done in 2 different colors. The bottom of it is going to be done in gray, just like the base, and the railing is going to be done in orange, like our accent pieces. Let's start on our base first. And one of the things that I want to do on this piece is we're going to be painting all of these guard rails along with the rails on these orange to match some of our other spot color choices. The piece that I think that will be lacking if we don't do something with is the actual base plate. And I think that our best bet, because we're going to have sort of a rim of orange around here, that we should put a rim of orange around the bottom. Well, there's not any real defined places to put that or that are really easily accessible, so what we're going to do is we're going to make something up as we go. Idea being that we're going to put a little bit of orange down now, we're going to mask over it, and come back and do the gray later. So, let's go ahead and start doing that. So we've got our 2 orange paints here. We're going to start with, this is fire orange, but pretty much any sort of dark orange will do. Actually, let's put the highlights down first and then come back over this. Doing a dark paint over a light paint usually works out better in the end. We're okay with spraying a little bit into these areas here. We're not too worried about overspraying at the moment just because we're going to mask it and then come back and cover that with our gray tones. So that's going to take a little bit of time to dry, and we'll come back in a second. We're going to kind of bounce around between a few steps here, so just hang tight and follow along. While we're waiting for that orange rim on the base to dry, we're going to work on the upper piece, which is going to be in beige tones. So to prepare for those beige tones, we're going to put a little bit of this darker brown color on some of the undersurfaces here. Alright, so next up we've got our lighter beige color. Now that we've got all the undersides covered in this, we're going to try to aim just from the top. So imagine that this can of spray paint is a flashlight and you're shining a light down on it. You don't want to flip it too far over shining lights underneath it. You want it to look like it's brighter on top and darker on the bottom. So now we've got stuff that's lighter on top and darker on the bottom. It's not a huge color difference, but it's enough. You start to get the intonations of light and shadow, and that's really what we're going for here. We also don't want to flood the model because we can still see all of these nice details on all the panels, and it'd be a shame to just flood those in. So we're going to do our ladders next, which are going to be the same orange that we were using on the rim on the bottom. So let's go ahead and put our lighter orange down first. You can see I'm turning this every once in a while here just to try to make sure I'm getting down into all of the edges in between the rungs and everything. So we're gonna wait until that dries and come back and add our dark orange in. So on the ladders, now that they're dry, we're gonna use some of the darker orange from the underside to give shadows on the undersides of the rungs and give us a general transition between the top, which is light, and the bottom, which is dark. Okay, so now we've got a really nice transition without a whole lot of effort, no wet blending, no airbrushing, ready to go. So on this one, we're going to use the same paint and we're going to try to get some spot dark areas here in between these ribs. I think that's going to give us a nice transition going from light at the peaks and dark sort of in the valleys here. I'm just sort of quickly spritzing in the middle here. You don't want to stay too long on one area, and to the best of your ability, just sort of keep things moving so that you're not accidentally flooding any of the detail like we talked about before. Okay, there we go. Looking pretty good. So now that this secondary orange color is dried, we're going to put some masking tape down on it. We've got some, I think, 1-inch tape, just enough to cover the area that we're trying to mask. Try to keep it really consistent as to how much of this bottom part that we're masking off. Masking tape is just a little bit translucent, so use that to your advantage. So now that we've got all the tape down, we're just going to fold over all these edges just so that you don't get paint coming in underneath the tape as you do this. I'm going to do every other one first, and then come back and do the odd ones. There we go. So now we're ready to black that area out again. So we're going to go for our enamel paint. Okay, so just going to go back over all the parts that aren't masked. You don't have to put a ton down because this MDF should be pretty well coated, so it's not going to be soaking up a lot of paint this go around. Okay, there we go. So as soon as that dries, we'll hit it with some gray and then we'll start working on the railing. So let's throw some gray on this. I like to come in at sort of shallow angles like this because you're less likely to have droplets of paint go into the details that are cut, so it preserves those details a little better. I'm not too worried about getting every single little surface gray. We're just trying to cover most of the upward facing ones. And like I said on the previous one, pretend like this can of spray paint is a flashlight. If the paint can't get there, light probably can't either. Next up is the gates. And for these, we're actually going to do the gray tones first before the orange railing because it's going to be a lot easier to tape off the gray once it's done rather than the orange. So we're just going to use our gray primer here, and we're going to coat that onto those surfaces. Once that dries, we're going to flip those over and get the backs. So for our movable gates, now that we've got gray on these pieces, we're going to mask off the lower section, leaving the rail. We've got our 2-inch masking tape. We're just going to take a little short segment here, and starting in the middle of one of the flat sides, we'll just wrap around. You're not too worried about keeping it tight at the bottom because they indent. Just want to keep a nice hard line right under the rail. And as soon as you get back over the tape that you've already put down, I like to fold it down like this so that you have an easy pull tab for when you're wanting to release it. You can also squeeze the bottom to make sure that it's sealed at the bottom so you don't get spray coming in from the underside. Now that we have all these taped off, we're going to go ahead and apply our lighter orange. We're going to get the undersides and the top sides of these. I find that it's easier just to hold them with a gloved hand. That way you can get all sides really quickly and lay it back down. Most of the time, if you lay them down with the points down, it won't tear any paint away when you pick them back up later. So now we're going to spray a little bit of the dark orange in the middle of the rails on top of these removable gateways. Just going to take a couple of quick passes there so we leave it pretty light on the edges and darker in the middle. Since we've got a lot of other contrasty sort of areas on this whole upper piece, while we'll have some orange from the ladders, I think that it would benefit from a little bit of black. So I'm thinking that the top of this smokestack here, starting with the ring, should probably also be matching the black and charcoal gray. So we're going to tape off this and the upper deck and make sure that we're not going to spray onto any of the areas below. So we're going to try to just get underneath that lip there. Kind of having to flex the tape a little bit as I'm going. I'm just sort of shoving it under the lip to cover up all these little light fixtures up top. And we'll check and see if we've got anything overlapping. Okay. All right, that looks solid. That should cover pretty much everything up. So I'm just gonna go ahead and run the rest of this tape out, covering over any of the rest of this. So now we need to cover this area, and we can use some of our 2-inch tape to cover up those areas pretty quickly. So for this part, we don't have to be particularly precise, because we'll come in and we'll put in a little piece that's gonna be a transition there to keep paint from going down in between. And just because you don't have anything directly below it over here, no platform, it's nice to have a little bit of a shield so that you don't get any coming down below. At least makes it a little harder. So now we're going to get some really thin tape. If you don't have any super thin masking tape, you can always cut some down, just lay it out on the table and cut it with a ruler. But honestly, we probably don't even need it to be this thin in this application. It may just be slightly faster. Okay. Any places where it's still a gap, just go back over it another time. So now, time to hit it with a coat of black. And try to keep the nozzle above the plane of the tape. It's just going to make it way less likely to accidentally get anything on these lower levels. Okay, checking it from all sides, and I think we're good. So now as soon as this dries, we'll hit it with some gray and we'll be ready to go back to the base. So now we've got our gray primer, and we'll just do a quick coat on top of the black that we just laid down. Okay, looking pretty good. So now we can take all of this tape off. Should be fine. Okay. Okay, so back to the base. We've got everything dried up here. So we're going to take the tape off and see how our transition, or our masking from the gray to the orange went. So now we've got this nice orange rim down here, and it's going to mirror some of the handrails that we have that are going to be from the removable gates. So now our next goal on this is going to be to actually color these pieces that are the connectors for the gates orange, so that they'll match the railing on those. To do that, we're mostly just going to mask off these outside areas and then put a little bit of masking tape on the insides and just generally mask off the surfaces here. So let's get started with the tape that fits best here. So looks like on the inside, this tape is going to be the best fit because we'll be able to get it essentially right up under the railing and we won't have to do a lot of cutting. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So let's get this right there under the railing. Just press it down in place. And I know we've got a gap between the bottom of the tape and the floor here, but we're going to do kind of a little transition the same way that we did on the top of the smokestack a minute ago. So we're going to wrap around here. Now we're going to do that on all of these pieces and then mask everything else off around it just so we don't get any overspray. So now I've used probably altogether too much tape. Basically I'm just trying to only have these pieces exposed. You can probably do this in some slightly more efficient ways, using tinfoil or other things that tend to hold their shape, and you can tear and place them a lot easier. I've got more or less the bottom in this section over here without any of those pieces exposed. So I'm just going to take a plastic bag here, stick it in there. That way it'll be a lot faster and easier just to cover up those areas without having to use another boatload of tape for this part. Let's just generally hold that in place there and get to spraying that with some orange. And with these ones, we're not going to put any of the dark orange on it because they'll essentially be the transition points between the removable gates, and they've already got the dark orange in the middle of them. So it'll kind of go from light orange on the connector onto the light orange on the side of the gate to dark orange to light orange back to the next connector. So we don't really have to do a two-step process for this. We can just sell for one. All that tape for that. But let's just use rattle cans, and we didn't need an airbrush. So now all that's left is for us to take all the tape off of everything for this monstrosity. One technique that we can do right here at the end, once we've assembled everything, is a little bit of chipping. Now, this we can't actually do with just a spray paint can, but I believe you guys probably have some foam laying around. So we'll get to that in a second. This is really loud tape. Let's get that knife that I swear I had 2 seconds ago. As we get closer to finishing this model up, there are some extra techniques that you could do to make this look even better. Some of them aren't rattle can techniques, but they're simple enough and you probably have the materials already. You could do a little bit of dry brushing, you could add weathering pigments or just washes to make rust streaks or oil slicks or things like that. You could also use things like the GW technical paints to add rust or slime or whatever extra pieces you want. You could even use GW decals to add numbering or faction symbols on any of these flat surfaces. There's a lot of opportunities to go further on this if you want to. This is a great place to start and an easy way to get a table full of terrain in a weekend. So now we've got all of the pieces painted, and all that we need to do is assemble it. For the assembly process, because we've got paint on everything now, I probably wouldn't recommend using wood glue or Elmer's glue or any kind of PVA. Super glue is going to be your best bet for good adhesion at this point. So on our top and bottom sections, we have a handful of ladders. So let's go ahead and get those in place and see how we're looking. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue here on the top surface, and then approximately where the bottom of that ladder is going to end up. So we can just plop that down in there, get it snapped in. There we go. Now our next ladder goes here. This one is actually one of the funky ones that goes over the notches in the base plate. So let's go ahead and get this glued in. All right. So there we go. And we'll get the ladder glued in here. There we go. Now this one goes here. So there we go. Got our ladders in place, and these should be ready to drop in as well. So now we've got our piece fully assembled. And like I said, there's other techniques that you can add on to this to make this more in tune with the type of terrain that you want on your tabletop. You can weather it, you can add foliage, you can add decals to make it look like it belongs to the faction that you're playing in this game. One that I think that we should do that it has to do with spray paint and is really fast and easy is the chipping technique. So let's do a little bit of that real quick. So we're going to pick some choice areas here, especially on the lighter surfaces, to do a little bit of chipping. This is just to indicate where some weathering might have occurred over time, where paint's chipped off, maybe rust has started to form underneath the paint. So especially your high traffic areas, tops of ladders, or edges that things might bump into over time are great places for this type of chipping. Outward facing edges are the best looking spots for these, or textured surfaces like these grating. And there we go. Simple technique, really ties it together and brings it to life. We hope that you enjoyed this video, learned something, or maybe just enjoyed spending some time with us. You can check out this kit along with all the other kits we're using in the 12 Days of Christmas videos at deathraydesigns.com/12days. Make sure to check out the previous videos and all the ones in the future. The next one's airing tomorrow. And until next time, happy working.